If I can show you how to get there easily, ethically, morally, and legally while helping other people reach their dreams, would you do it? Would you do it? It'll take you out of your comfort zone a little bit. Okay? But would you do it? Have you ever heard of subject to wraparound mortgages, owner financing, wholesaling, rental, rehabbing? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to find just one house and one buyer a month. I want you to take over the payments of the seller, lender. And then I want you to sell or finance the house to a deserving buyer. That's it. That's it. Because here's what happens. Let's say that the down payment is $5,000. That's what you're going to make on this transaction when you sell that house. Okay? Now, I know, you're probably going to make more. You might make less. I'm going to say average, okay? Just average. Okay? And if you make more and you average more, you just screw up the numbers, okay? So $5,000. Have the spread on the wrap, that is the amount that you're paying and the amount that they're paying you, be $250. Now understand something. That's about 2 points. That's a 4% loan to a 6% loan, or a 6% loan to an 8% loan, and about $120,000. That's $250 more. So let's look at some of the math. One house a month times the $5,000 average is what? What's on the board here? Shout it out. 60,000. Okay? Plus the difference between the original loan payment to the underlying lender of $250 a month per house is $3,000 a month, which is $36,000 a year. Now, there are timing differences. For you folks that are engineers, yes, I do recognize it. I did not take into account that you're buying one house each month, so your amount on that $36,000 is going to be less. Okay? Do not send me an email. Okay? As my wife says, you get very passive-aggressive when people challenge that part of it. I said, geez, you know, I had a guy write me 3 pages.
You want somebody to figure out what it really is?
No, I know what it is. But then, you know, I write back and I say, you know, what that assumes, your deal assumes that you buy them on the 1st and not the 15th. And so, now we're having this. I was a physics major when I started out in college. Okay, I wound up as an economics major. All right, so I know the time value of money. I know how to screw this up, but I don't know how to teach it very well so that it's understandable. So we're just going with that. So the total your first year is $96,000. Gets better the second year because you get the same $96,000 plus the $36,000 from the first year's loans. One house per month. So the total of the second year is $132,000. The third year you do it again and you get $96,000 plus the $36,000 from the first year, $36,000 from the second year. Now you're up to $168,000. Stop. And you make the $36,000, the $36,000, and the $36,000 for the next at least 27 years. The very worst thing that will happen to you is that they'll pay off the loan. If they pay off the loan, you have to go out and find another house to replace the cash flow. But that's the absolute worst thing. Now, you'll probably think, well, no, it's really if they default, if they don't pay on the loan. No, understand, if they default, there are ways to get the house back quickly. And you sell it again and collect $5,000 and start over with that house. Okay? I'll get you in a minute. Understand that if your spread is more, you have to sell less houses. You make more money on a down payment, you screw up the numbers. You make more money. That's it. You screw up my numbers though. Okay? Yes, sir.
So they're buying the house
house through the financing, and they're responsible for all maintenance.
Yes, the ultimate buyer is responsible for all maintenance. Absolutely.
Taxes, insurance, so on.
Absolutely. Taxes, insurance, maintenance, they can paint the walls purple if they want to. Absolutely. It's their house. And there's some advantages to that we'll talk about in a little bit. So again, what's your dream? Can you see that it's possible, maybe even achievable, maybe even a good chance to reach it if you have a little help? Would you agree? No? Okay. That was my wife's dream. That's actually a picture that I see every night I'm in Corpus Christi. I'm actually live in San Antonio, but we have a house on the water in Corpus Christi. You don't think this can work? I bought that house for $5,000 now. The owner financed it for 30 years at 4%. I asked if he'd forego the first 6 months of payments, and he said yes. I said, can I have the furniture? And he said yes. I said, what kind of car do you drive? And he said, you can't have that. Well, I was just seeing, you know, just wondered. And that's a $200,000 house. It's 1,800 square feet. It's not, we did not want a big house. It's perfect for the beach. It's hard to see, but there's actually a fence here that we put. There's one post right there. Every night we watch the redfish tailing. Redfish, and these redfish have a little dot on their tail. But it's a prized game fish. It's a very good eating fish. In Texas, you can only keep the ones that are between 24 and 28 inches. Yeah, 24 and 28 inches are the only ones you can keep. And you can keep one that's over that. And the redfish that I see, there's 4 of them that have to exceed 28 inches. They're huge. The fins are out of the water. I can't catch them, but I catch them all over Corpus Christi and out in the ocean and everything else. I can't catch them off my deck. So at least that's what I tell my wife when I have to go out in the boat. So, okay. Then you're going to say, but that won't work in California. Well, that won't work in my city. That won't work in Santa Barbara. That won't work in my market. That won't work with my sellers. That won't work with my buyers. Bullshit. And that's a legal term. Okay? It will work. It will work here. I met with a guy for lunch today who's doing this in LA. Now, his numbers are really screwed up. His last deal, he made $50 grand on the down payment on a $125,000 house. Okay? There are people doing it, even here. Okay? You can do it here. One thing that you have to realize, you have to adapt. As real estate investors, you have to adapt. You have to adapt. I used to do rehabs. I love rehabs. I love getting down and you know, cutting this side of the door 80 inches and this side 79 and having to do it over again and you know, all kinds of things. It's fading, but you may see right here, looks like a little bit of scars, and yes, that was from a rehab where I was cutting off the bottom of the door with the saw. See, you've got one too. I will tell you something, that if you're using a circular saw and you're cutting off the bottom, let the saw stop before you see if it's split at the bottom. Okay? Because what I did was I yelled, Leanne! She ran for her purse to get her car keys because she knew exactly. We've done this before. And took me to the emergency room. I walked up and said, I cut my fingers with a circular saw, and the nurse behind the counter said, off? And I said, no. She said, sit down. Well, okay. You know, but you have to adapt. I loved rehabs. I don't do them anymore. Okay? It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error or shortcoming, but who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself for a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat. Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, if nothing else, please, get in the arena. This is a phenomenal time to be in real estate. It's a phenomenal time. I've got 26 houses under contract that we put under contract in the last 2 weeks. Okay? We've got websites that have 125 well-qualified leads to sell houses that we can't get to because we just don't have time to talk to them. It's all over. They're all over. Why is this important? Well, we've got a lending crisis. Would everybody say that probably we have a lending crisis? I'll tell you, we do have a lending crisis. I'm going to call GMAC because they're holding my mortgage, but I wanted to refinance my house.
You better go.
With USAA.
No, GMAC.
And called, and they went through all of this, and their appraisal came back at $232,000, and we wanted to refinance $120,000. I paid on this mortgage for 11 years, on time, every time. My credit scores, my wife's credit scores, are north of 760. They pulled the credit report, and they said, you have a lot of mortgages on your credit report. Yes, I'm a real estate investor, but you have a lot of mortgages on your credit report. Okay, I can see where this is going, right? They said to me, well, we're not going to turn you down for the loan, but we're going to require you to pay off $198,000 worth of these mortgages before we'll give you the $120,000 you're asking us. And of course I said, well, why don't I just pay the $120,000 off and take the $78,000 and go to Vegas? I said, well, we're not turning you down. You just have to pay these off. So, very hard to get loans. So if it's hard to get loans, is it hard to buy houses? Yeah. If it's hard to buy houses, is it hard to sell a house a traditional way? Of course. That's why this is so powerful. If not now, when? So let's talk about subject 2. Subject 2 is a technique for buying and selling property in which the loan of the seller isn't being paid off at closing. That's all it is. That's all it is. What do you need to be careful about? Well, you need to be careful about the due on sale clause. That's what we get most. Inadequate disclosures that create sellers' issues later. The legal agreements, the contracts. The SAFE Act, Mars regulation, truth in lending, minimizing the risk, your exit strategy, and what can go wrong and how do I handle it. So let's talk about those. I hear there's something called the due on sale clause. Is it legal to do this? How many people have heard that it's illegal to do subject to? Yeah, yeah. Well, you know what? I got to tell you something. Not my research. And I'm going to show you and tell you exactly why it's not illegal. First of all, if you read the typical clause, it says that the lender may, at its option. Okay. Well, if call a due. Well, if it's their option to call it due. It's also their option not to call it due. Well, okay, so far so good. The federal government, in the Garden-St. Germain Act, everybody hear of the Garden-St. Germain Act? In the Garden-St. Germain Act, said that we're going to supersede all state laws in this area. Now, why did they do that? Well, I'll tell you exactly why. This was at the request of the lenders. Because states were starting to have a patchwork of different rules and regulations. I must say, we do thank the Supreme Court of California for pushing this along. Okay? In California, you could only do it if it was material. In Minnesota, you could do it any time. If you were in North Dakota, you could do it this way. If you were in Texas, you had to shoot somebody. So I mean, that's kind of so the lenders were very upset with this, and they wanted uniformity in this. So the federal government said, fine, we're going to supersede all state laws. So if anybody tells you, show me the state law that says that we can do this, you will not find it. Our federal government has said all of those state laws, and they did a phase-in in '82 when the law was passed, but by 1986, there were no state laws with respect to subject to. In the Garden-St. Germain Act, Congress specifically allowed for subject to. And then they took an unusual step. The federal government actually, in the statute, encouraged, and that's exactly the word they used, lenders to allow subject to transactions. Then they developed regulations, and they talk about wraparound loans, and they talk about subject to, and they talk about all these different things about how subject tos are to be done. Okay, so the federal government enacts the Garden-St. Germain Act, which supersedes state law, saying the federal government's going to regulate this. Then they put in the law that they encourage it. Then they put in regulations that say this is a good thing. I'm not telling you it's illegal. The HUD. How many of you have seen the HUD-1 settlement statement? Check out line 203 and line 503. What's it say? Loans taken subject to. Well, if you actually look at this transaction, if you look at the instructions for filling that out, which is what we have to follow as closers, it says this is where you write in the amount of the loan that is not being paid off at closing and is going to remain on the property after closing. Well, gee, that sounds a whole hell of a lot like the definition of subject to, doesn't it? Okay, so in April of 2010, the federal government promulgated the HUD-1 again. They revised it.